She says the moment she heard gunshots, she feared for her friend's life.
Yesterday,
Bullet holes are found on Shawnee Drury's front door.
it's right here. They're all of them are right here. He made it into my truck, I guess, and he shot her 4 or 5 more times over there. And then she managed to make it over here at that point, and he shot her like 8 more times. It was just so senseless, you know, so senseless.
Imagine a warm summer evening in Harris County, Texas. A 29-year-old mother, terrified and bleeding, is running barefoot through her apartment complex, pounding on strangers' doors, screaming for help, her heart racing like it might burst. Behind her, her boyfriend holds a gun, hurling threats and footsteps of pursuit. Just seconds later, she collapses in the parking lot. Neighbors duck behind walls. Some hear her final cry. Others freeze. A single shot echoes. Silence follows. This is Merciana Struggs, a woman trying to escape the man she loved, only to meet her death in public, in full view of terrified witnesses. Welcome to True Crime 911. Before we begin, I've noticed something. About 75% of you watching right now aren't subscribed. Think about that. Merciana ran for her life. She begged strangers for help. Many looked away. Don't be that person. Don't look away now. Subscribe so victims like her are never forgotten, never silenced. And if you still refuse, head to the comments and tell us why you'd turn your back while stories like hers unfold. Now, here's what really happened that night, and what authorities uncovered in the days that followed. Merciana Struggs was only 29 years old, a young mother, a daughter, a sister, and the center of her family's world. To those who loved her, she wasn't just another name in a tragic headline. She was known for her laughter, her kindness, and her loyalty. Her family described her as our rock, someone who always showed up when they needed her most. In a GoFundMe page created after her death, her sister, Kiamani Struggs, wrote, "Merciana was a loving mother, daughter, and sister, loyal and kind. She was truly the backbone of our family." Her family explained that she had recently moved to Houston, Texas, looking for a fresh start and a chance to build something better for herself and her son. But instead of stability, what she found was danger. According to her family, she lost her life in a domestic violence situation while simply trying to recover her car from her ex-boyfriend. The fundraiser shared that whatever donations went beyond her cremation would be used to support her 8-year-old son, a boy who, in a matter of seconds, lost his mother forever. Neighbors, too, recalled her as someone warm, approachable, and kind. To them, she wasn't the kind of person you'd ever expect to be caught in the middle of violence. She was the woman you'd pass in the parking lot with a smile, the mother you'd see carrying groceries or helping her child into the car. But the reality was more complicated than what anyone saw from the outside. Like too many women in this country, Merciana was living in the shadow of an abusive relationship. Behind closed doors, she was trying to break free from someone who had grown dangerously controlling. And in the summer of 2024, that choice to reclaim her life would cost her everything. She was more than a victim. She was a person, a mother who will never get to watch her son grow up, a daughter who will never call her parents again, a sister whose absence is now a permanent wound in her family. Merciana Struggs was human, and that is how she deserves to be remembered. The man police say pulled the trigger was Nicholas Finley, 34 years old, Merciana's boyfriend. On paper, Finley was just another resident of Cypress Station Apartments in North Harris County, Texas. But behind closed doors, people who live nearby say the relationship between him and Merciana was tense. Neighbors described hearing raised voices, arguments that seemed to grow more frequent. For those who knew her, it was clear Merciana was trying to pull away. Investigators would later reveal that in the hours before her death, Merciana was attempting to recover her car from Finley, a sign prosecutors say that she was ready to move on without him. That act of independence may have been the breaking point. Court documents show that Finley is now facing a capital murder charge. Prosecutors argue that this was not a split-second outburst, but a deliberate choice to chase Murciana down, corner her, and fire his weapon in front of dozens of horrified neighbors. The motive? While police have not given a single clear answer, pieces of the story suggest layers of conflict. Family members confirmed this was a domestic violence situation. Social media chatter and some reports suggest financial disputes, that Finley may have been trying to control her money or possessions. In fact, one of the clearest facts we do know, Murciana wanted her vehicle back, and Finley refused to let her go without a fight. Rumors also swirled online that money from an Onlyfans account may have played a role, with Finley allegedly demanding a share. While that claim has not been confirmed by investigators, it speaks to the broader picture of control, power, and resentment that seems to have defined their relationship. After the shooting, authorities say Finley didn't stay behind to face the consequences. Instead, he allegedly grabbed Murciana's purse, took her vehicle, and fled the scene. To law enforcement, these actions painted a chilling portrait: a man unwilling to let go, and a woman whose attempt at freedom ended in a brutal public killing. The stage for this tragedy was a sprawling apartment complex just north of Houston, Cypress Station Apartments off Cypress Station Drive in Harris County, Texas. It's the kind of community you pass without giving it much thought. Rows of beige and brick buildings, cars lined up in crowded parking lots, children playing in courtyards when the heat lets up. For many residents, it was simply home. But as any longtime tenant will tell you, Cypress Station had its share of problems. The area had seen police activity before. It wasn't unusual to hear raised voices in the night or see patrol cars roll through on weekends. Still, nothing could prepare the residents for what they were about to witness on the evening of July 19, 2024. On that summer night, the ordinary sounds of apartment life, televisions humming through thin walls, kids laughing on stairwells, neighbors coming home from work, would be shattered by something no one could have imagined. Because when the shots rang out, and when a mother came pounding on doors begging for help, those quiet apartments suddenly felt less like a home and more like the backdrop of a nightmare. But neighbors would soon witness a chase that felt more like a horror movie than real life. It was just after 6 p.m. on July 19, 2024, when neighbors at Cypress Station began noticing something unusual. A woman was running through the courtyard, barefoot, frantic, pounding on doors, begging for help. That woman was Murciana Struggs. She had been in an argument with her boyfriend, Nicholas Finley, and now she was desperately trying to escape. Witnesses later told investigators that she looked terrified, the kind of fear you don't forget. She sprinted across the complex, pleading with strangers to let her in. At one point, she even tried to jump into a neighbor's car, hoping that if she could just get inside, she'd be safe. But she never made it. Behind her, Finley was closing in. He had a gun. Neighbors reported hearing him yell threats, warning that anyone who helped her would face the same fate. People froze. Some locked their doors. Others hid in their bathrooms. Everyone could hear the panic unfolding, but few could bring themselves to step outside. And then the silence of that evening broke. The sharp cracks of gunfire echoed through the complex. Witnesses say multiple shots rang out. Murciana collapsed in the open, bleeding, as the chase came to an end. In the aftermath, residents peeked through blinds, terrified. Some dialed 911. Others stood in shock, replaying the screams and the sound of gunfire in their minds. It felt unreal, like a nightmare they couldn't wake up from. You're hearing this, and maybe you're still not subscribed. Imagine if it were your sister, your mother or your daughter running for her life while everyone stood by in silence. Subscribing takes 1 second. Looking away takes a lifetime of guilt. Which one will you choose? If you can't bring yourself to subscribe, at least tell us why in the comments, because I can't understand how anyone could ignore this. The neighbors at Cypress Station couldn't stop what happened next, because as Murciana lay dying, the man she was running from didn't stop with the shooting. When the first shots rang out, panic spread across the Cypress Station complex. Witnesses say Murciana had just reached a car, a neighbor's vehicle parked near the courtyard. She yanked at the door handle, desperate for safety, desperate for someone to let her in. But before she could climb inside, Nicholas Finley raised his gun and fired. Multiple shots cut through the air. The sound echoed off the walls of the apartment buildings, bouncing through stairwells and hallways. Residents ducked for cover. Children screamed. Doors slammed shut. Murciana collapsed just feet away from the car she had been trying to reach. For a brief moment, there was silence, the kind of silence that follows only after unimaginable violence. Neighbors peered through blinds, some too afraid to move, others frozen in place, their hearts pounding. But it wasn't over. Finley didn't stop at one shot. He stood over her, firing again. Court documents later confirmed she was struck multiple times before falling to the ground. By then, she had no chance of survival. Terrified witnesses later told investigators that it felt like a scene out of a nightmare. Some neighbors had been outside when it happened, close enough to see her collapse. Others huddled inside, hearing everything but unable to bring themselves to open their doors. The collective memory was one of fear, not just of the man with the gun, but of what it meant to watch helplessly as a young mother's life was stolen in front of them. And as Murciana lay motionless on the pavement, Finley didn't stop. His next actions shocked everyone even more. In the moments after the gunfire, chaos swept through the complex. Residents peeked out from their doors, some clutching children, others still on the phone with 911, whispering as though the shooter might hear them. But Nicholas Finley wasn't done. Instead of fleeing empty-handed, police say he bent down, grabbed Murciana's purse, and then took off in her car. To many who watched from behind their blinds, it was a final act of cruelty, stripping away not only her life, but the small belongings she carried with her. Neighbors were left paralyzed. For some, the sound of her pounding on doors would haunt them. For others, the image of her collapsing just feet away from safety would never fade. The courtyard where children once played had turned into the scene of a public execution. Paramedics would later pronounce her dead at the scene. And while authorities raced to track Finley down, the residents of Cypress Station were left shaken, horrified, and carrying the weight of a trauma they didn't choose but would never forget. But while police searched for the killer, disturbing details about their relationship surfaced. As investigators began piecing the case together, the question everyone wanted answered was why? Why would a man gun down his girlfriend in front of dozens of neighbors in broad daylight? For Murciana's family, the answer was tragically clear. They had long suspected she was trapped in an abusive relationship. Relatives confirmed that domestic violence had been part of her life with Finley, and that she had been trying to distance herself. One of the strongest indicators of this was her attempt to get her car back from him on the very day she was killed. For prosecutors, that detail painted a chilling picture. Murciana was trying to reclaim her independence, and Finley refused to let her go. Beyond that, whispers of financial control began to surface. Online discussions pointed to possible disputes over money. There were even rumors on social media that Finley had pressured her over the income she was making. Some speculated from platforms like Onlyfans. While those claims have not been confirmed by investigators, the broader truth is that financial control is a common tactic in abusive relationships, and Murciana's struggle to regain her possessions, her car, and her autonomy all pointed in that direction. To her family, though, the motive mattered less than the outcome. Murciana was a young mother who wanted a better life for her children. Instead, her final moments were spent running for safety in her own neighborhood, only to be silenced by someone she once trusted. And as detectives pulled together the pieces, the chase, the gun, and the stolen car, it became clear that this was not a random act of violence. It was the final act in a cycle of control, fear, and abuse. But what came next would show just how determined authorities were to bring Findley to justice. After fleeing the scene in Murciana's car, Nicholas Findley became the target of an urgent police manhunt. Harris County Sheriff's deputies immediately began circulating his description, warning that he was armed, dangerous, and on the run. For hours, investigators tracked leads across North Houston. Detectives combed through surveillance cameras, interviewed witnesses, and traced the stolen vehicle. The pressure was mounting. A man accused of gunning down his girlfriend in front of neighbors was loose in the community. But Findley didn't get far. Within days, authorities located him. He was arrested and taken into custody without further violence. Prosecutors wasted no time, charging him with capital murder. That charge carries the most severe penalties under Texas law, reflecting the brutality of the crime and the public danger it posed. For Murciana's family, the arrest was only the beginning of a long fight for justice. The pain of losing her could never be erased, but seeing her accused killer behind bars was at least a first step toward accountability. Think about this. If Murciana's story fades into silence, it could happen again, to someone you know. By subscribing to True Crime 911, you help make sure these stories stay alive. Don't just scroll past her like she didn't matter. If you won't subscribe, then you owe us an answer in the comments. Why would you turn your back on a mother who ran for her life? But as Findley sat in jail awaiting trial, another story was quietly unfolding, one that revealed just how much Murciana had meant to the people who loved her most. In the weeks after his arrest, the focus shifted from the streets of Harris County to the courtroom. Nicholas Findley was formally charged with capital murder, the most serious charge under Texas law. Prosecutors made it clear from the start they would seek the maximum penalty allowed. The facts of the case, they argued, were undeniable. Findley had pursued his girlfriend through a crowded apartment complex, shot her multiple times in public, and then fled the scene with her belongings. Court documents detailed the chilling sequence of events, and prosecutors have said this wasn't a crime of passion. It was a deliberate, calculated act of control and violence. The presence of neighbors, the screams, the sheer terror of the chase only underscored the brutality of what happened. Defense attorneys, for their part, have remained quiet about their strategy, but with eyewitness testimony, surveillance evidence, and forensic proof tying Findley to the shooting, the road ahead for him looks grim. If convicted of capital murder, Findley faces life in prison without parole, and prosecutors could even push for the death penalty, depending on how the case unfolds. For Murciana's family, each hearing is another reminder of their loss. Justice may take months or even years, but the hope is that the outcome will reflect the weight of the life taken. A young mother, gunned down while running for her life. But while the legal battle plays out, the family's grief has already written its own verdict. For Murciana Strug's family, the news was more than a headline. It was the shattering of their world. In the days after her death, relatives turned to the community for help, creating a GoFundMe page to cover funeral expenses and provide for her children. On that page, her loved ones wrote with raw heartbreak, "On Friday, July 19th, our beloved Murciana was taken from us in a tragic act of violence. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and most importantly, a mother. Her children are now left without the guiding light of their mother, and our family is left trying to pick up the pieces of this unimaginable loss." The fundraiser described her as someone full of life, laughter, and love. A young woman who worked hard and carried the weight of being a single mother, doing everything she could to give her children a better life. Now, those children will grow up without their mom. Family members said she was their protector, their provider, and the person they could always turn to. That absence is permanent, and it's a pain that no amount of justice in court can erase. The fundraiser appeal ended with a plea. We want to honor her memory and ensure that her children know how deeply she was loved. Any support is greatly appreciated, not just for funeral costs, but to help provide some stability for her children as they face a future without their mother. For the neighbors at Cypress Station, for her friends, and for the online community who came together to support her family, the grief was collective. But for her children, it was personal and devastating. And as the case moved forward, one thing became clear. Murciana's story couldn't end in silence. Experts on domestic violence say one thing over and over. The most dangerous time for a victim is when they try to leave. That's the point when abusers feel their control slipping, and too often, that's when violence turns deadly. Murciana Strug's story is a painful example. She was trying to take her life back, trying to get her car, her freedom, her independence. But instead of letting her go, Nicholas Finley made sure she never walked away. Her death highlights a reality that's bigger than one relationship, one apartment complex, or one city. Domestic violence doesn't just happen behind closed doors. It spills into communities, into schools, into workplaces, and it leaves children, families, and neighborhoods forever changed. Murciana ran for her life, but couldn't escape. Her story is a reminder of how quickly love can turn into a nightmare. But what would you have done in her place? Do you think justice will truly be served in this case? Let us know in the comments. Before we close, I need to say something important. These videos don't just appear overnight. It takes hours of digging through reports, reading court documents, listening to witness accounts, and piecing together every detail because victims like Murciana deserve to have their stories told with respect. And yet, I see that most of you watching still haven't subscribed. Ask yourself this: if her story mattered enough for you to watch, why wouldn't you support the work that keeps these stories alive? Subscribing costs nothing, but it means everything. It's the difference between these cases being remembered or being forgotten. If you truly can't bring yourself to hit that button, then at least tell me why in the comments. I honestly want to know. What keeps you from standing with us, from standing with victims like Murciana? For those of you who do subscribe, you're not just supporting this channel. You're making sure her voice and the voices of others like her are never silenced again.